Are you a tactics-minded player? If the answer to that question is yes, you are going to love this class. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben, you here for another Starfinder 2nd Edition video, and welcome to my Envoy guide. I'm going to be breaking down everything I've learned about the Envoy by kind of reading through the documents, and this class is really neat and intricate. Before I get going here, let me just say that I am going to have Starfinder 2nd Edition videos every day this week. Please consider subscribing to support this content. I'm going to be spending at least 40 hours producing content on Starfinder, and it is a daunting task, but this is really fun so far. And if you like what you see here and you would like to see more of this in the future, please consider financially supporting my channel by becoming a YouTube member. And thank you to all of my recent YouTube members. I am recording this video way in advance of the release of Starfinder, so I can't thank you by name right now. In terms of sections of this video, first I'm going to start by introducing this class, since many of you when you're watching this video will have no idea exactly what the Envoy is. Then in terms of tactics and strategy, I'm going to talk about kind of the class fantasy and why you might want to play this class. Then I want to evaluate the subclasses, because the subclasses are really interesting in that you need to evaluate them on two different pressure points. More on that later once we have gotten into the classes. And then I'm going to talk about some of the notable feats and best feats that really caught my eye as I was doing my first read through. Now, full disclosure on something here. Paizo gifted me a copy of this book so that I could make this content. But during this recording window, I was under embargo not to talk about it with anyone. So I could not get a group together and playtest some of these things. So a lot of today's stuff is going to be from theory and kind of some sample combats that I ran all by myself. So if I've got something wrong, I apologize for that. And if you have any thoughts on anything in this video that you think I have missed or overlooked or gotten wrong, please throw those down in the comments below, as I am definitely in the learning stage of this class, even though I just spent multiple hours kind of combing through and making notes about this class. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's begin with basic class features here. The Envoy is going to be a charisma-based character with moderate HP and exceptionally good skill trainings. So to start off with, they are getting 6+ int modifier in terms of skill trainings. That is very good. We have respectable saving throws as well. So you are going to be a very good out of combat character with all of these skill trainings, and you are also going to have charisma as a core stat, meaning that you are going to be pretty good as a party face. This character is going to play out very much as a true party leader. You are going to be good at stuff, you are going to be able to talk to people, and you are going to be very good at giving your allies more actions and reactions and giving them bonuses on things that you request them to do. In terms of your defenses, you are usually just going to be in light armor, although one of these subclasses can give you medium armor, and you're trained in martial weapons, so you're good to go as far as that is concerned. The defining class feature of the Envoys are activities called directives, and these are going to be done as either 1 or 2 action activities, and the base directive is called Get 'em. So, you select an enemy within 60 feet that you can see, you and your allies gain a +1 status bonus to attacks against that target until the beginning of your next turn. Now that, as a single standalone action, is a perfectly fine action and a wonderful way to round out a turn. But you can then lead by example instead and complete this as a 2-action activity. If you are doing that, you strike the target in addition to doing the top stuff. And you gain a status bonus to the damage roll equal to your charisma modifier, which in the early game is probably going to be 4. So that is just straight up 4 flat damage onto your strikes. Then regardless of whether the strike hits, your allies gain a +1 status bonus to damage on subsequent strikes made against that enemy until the start of your next turn. And then that damage is going to scale up as you level up. And it is very easy to see why this is powerful. You could be a martial character or you could be a ranged character. Let's evaluate both. If you are a martial character using strength as your secondary stat, you might be adding 4 charisma damage and 3 strength damage at level 1 to strikes. That is a very, very beefy hit. And if you are a ranged character, getting to add 4 to your ranged damage is exceptional. In terms of an easy comparison, the Inventor can add 5 flat damage on a critical success on their overdrive action, but you just get to add that damage, assuming that you hit with your strike. There is no skill check required to make that work. This seems like a very, very strong class ability. Your subclasses are going to be called leadership styles, and we're going to loop back to those and evaluate those as an entire section. But for now, let me just say that your leadership style is going to give you another directive that you can use regularly, and it will have both a 1 and 2 action version. As you are a skill monkey class, you get additional skill increases. At second level and at every level thereafter, you are going to get a skill increase. So again, you have good charisma, and assuming you put some into int, you are probably going to end up trained in most things you want to be trained in, and expert or master or legendary in the ones that you care about the most. Since you are going to have so many different skill trainings, you might not be able to get all the skill feats you want. That's where the adaptive talent comes in at 3rd level, allowing you to temporarily take some skill feats. And at 9th and 15th level, you are going to be able to scale up the number of feats you take from 1 to 2, and eventually 3. So you can not only be good at charisma, have training in a lot of skills, but then you can also adapt your skills to be just perfect for the situation that you are going to want to be in. And already we can see that the Envoy is going to be a very good balanced character. The Envoy isn't just going to be good in combat, it's going to be excellent out of combat as well. Again, this idea of being a true party leader is very much exemplified by this class. Perhaps the thing that excites me most about this class, though, is improved mastery at 5th level. This is a free action once a day when you're about to attempt a skill check using a skill that you don't have master proficiency in. You just gain master proficiency for the triggering skill for the skill check. So, if somehow you are in a situation where you don't have exactly the perfect skill for it, you just are a master in that skill for a critical action that matters. Hey, this should count lores too. So you need a niche lore for a critical recall knowledge check. I'm a master in that lore. It is very specific, so it is going to have a reduced DC, and I'm going to have a massive bonus to that. This is a very strong ability, and you are going to be able to scale up this ability as well as you level up. At level 11, the Savvy Improviser is going to let you use that an additional time a day. And at 15th level, instead of bumping you up to a Master, your Legendary Improvisation is going to bump you up to Legendary instead. And for those of you that have not played games to 15th level and beyond, being Legendary in a skill often feels like cheating in terms of your success rate. The Envoy is going to be a master at taking and giving reactions, and the 13th level class feat, Tactician, is going to give you an additional reaction for any Envoy reaction, which I think is generically quite powerful, as we will come to see as we start getting into some of these potential reactions that you could do. This could include making multiple reaction-based strikes. Wild. And if for some reason your legendary proficiencies and things aren't carrying you hard enough already, the 19th level feat Silver Tongue is going to give you a reroll, and you get to use the better result on a deception, diplomacy, intimidation, or whatever your leadership skill is, and you're going to get those from your subclass. You just get a reroll on a critical check. Fortune effects are really, really, really good. So, summarizing before we move on, you have a charisma-based class with an exceptional number of int skills. You could be a melee class, you could be a range class, maybe you have multiple sets of arms and you're going to do both depending on what the situation is. You're going to have a decent ability to hand out reactions. You can prepare skills on a daily basis for exactly the same situation. This is a powerful class core. Bill from the future here. After I had finished recording the majority of this video, I realized that I made one mistake, but it's a pretty big mistake. I realized this when I read one of the 20th level feats. In the Envoy's directives section here, it says you can issue one directive a round. And I had missed that tiny sentence when I had read through this class. So if in other portions of this video I say something like you can do a 1-action directive and then a 2-action get 'em, that is not true. Most of the evaluation of the stuff that I said is still going to be true, so I'm not going to re-record the entire video and redo all of my notes. But just know that you don't get more than one directive a round until like 20th level when you get a feat that does that specifically. Welcome to evaluating new class features, where sometimes you miss one tiny thing and it changes your evaluations greatly. Next up, we're going to start talking about our leadership styles, which are our Envoy subclasses. And each one of these is going to give you a handful of things. You're going to get a leadership skill. You're going to get a leadership perk, which is usually going to be a feat, although not in this case. And then you are going to get a new directive. From the front is probably what you take if you want to be on the front lines as a martial character regularly. It is going to give you medium armor that scales up with the light armor expertise that you are normally going to get from this class. And the into position directive is weird. And this is why I say when you evaluate the subclasses, you need to evaluate them on 2 different points. You need to evaluate the 1-action activity and the 2-action activity separately, because the power level is often very, very different between these 2 things. The 1-action activity here is, I think, great. So you select an enemy within 60 feet. Allies within the target's reach can step as a reaction. Allies within 30 feet of you and not adjacent to the target can stride as a reaction, but must end closer to the target. So let's break this down. If you have a couple of allies in range of a martial enemy, and all of the allies step, that character, that enemy, is now going to need to waste one of their actions to step up to them in return. And that means that that already wastes one enemy action. That is great. If you are high on initiative and you begin let's rephrase this. If you are closing ranks with an enemy and your allies have a reaction, which may not necessarily happen in the first round of combat if you are kind of caught off guard, because raw, you don't tend to have a reaction in the first round of combat. Sometimes you will be given your reaction in the first round of combat if it is like very clearly that you are about to square up against people, but otherwise raw, you usually don't have that reaction. So let's say it's round 2 of combat instead, and you get to go use this 1-action activity, and now all of your martial allies then get to rush up to the enemy using their reaction that they might not have used anyway in that round. This is quite powerful. If you use the 2-action version instead, you're going to then strike the target, in addition to what was done above. And the target takes a -1 circumstance penalty on attacks made against other creatures until the start of your next turn. I think the 1-action version of this is pretty good. I think the 2-action version is pretty bad. So imagine you do the 1-action version of this and then just a regular strike. That singular target is not taking a -1 circumstance penalty on their attacks against other creatures, but otherwise all the rest of this stuff is still happening. This can be kind of neat if you are making a ranged strike, where if the enemy wants to not take this penalty, they need to run up to you, and it might be more efficient for them to hit the people around them. But I am not the most impressed by this. I think the 1-action is great, but this is actually good that the 1-action version is great, because you can just use multiple directives in a turn. So you could use the single action to get everyone closer, and then use your 2 actions to do a 2-action get 'em, buffing up all of your allies while also getting a strike and giving your allies some bonus damage. Overall, I am going to give From the Front a thumbs up still. I think the fact that you get medium armor is going to be very good for the strength-oriented martial versions of this class, but I don't like the 2-action version of its directive. Subclass 2 is From the Shadows. This is the stealth-oriented one. You're going to get Assurance in stealth as well as the Coordinated Ambush directive. The difference in power level between the 2 versions of this are insane. I think the 1-action one is very, very, very bad. So you designate an enemy creature within 60 feet and an ally within 60 feet. If the ally is hidden, undetected, or unnoticed to the target at the start of their turn, they treat their target as off guard until the end of their turn, instead of when they become visible to the target. I think this does nothing a huge portion of the time. Like, what percentage of the time in combat are your allies realistically going to be hidden, undetected, or unnoticed? In my Pathfinder 2E play, the answer to that is not 0, but it's pretty close. A lot of times getting these like hidden, undetected, unnoticed stuff, like getting these statuses involves taking actions off in combat, unless you have some very specific abilities that just kind of do it automatically. And so I think the 1-action version of this is close to doing nothing and is quite bad. However, if you use 2 actions, you then get to hide or sneak. That is still pretty unimpressive. But here's the good part. Until the start of your next turn, you can strike the enemy target as a reaction the first time your ally you targeted attacks your designated enemy. So, you do this for 2 actions on your turn. You don't get a lot of value. You make a 1-action strike on the enemy. You then use your reaction to make a second 1-action strike, but it is done at full accuracy, and your multi-attack penalty does not apply. So if you are specifically looking to take 2 strikes, maybe 2 ranged strikes at full accuracy against someone, this is quite powerful. But it is a very powerful thing attached to some very, very weak things. And if you are always using 2 actions to do the coordinated ambush, then that means that you are not using your 2 actions to do get 'em to add your charisma modifier, which again is quite large to your damage roll. I think this class has enough different ways to end up using reactions that From the Shadows is not going to be one of the better subclasses, despite the fact that it gives you this like potential like pseudo ranged attack of opportunity. But this is one of those times where I really need to playtest that to see how this plays out to really tell for sure. What I think is very interesting here is you have the potential, once you get multiple reactions, to do the coordinated ambush 2-action, take a reaction strike, and then still have another reaction left for your other envoy abilities. So it may be that as you level up, you end up having access to some very powerful turns where you consistently are using one of your reactions through this, and you still get another reaction. Next up is the Guns Blazing one, which gives you incredible initiative, adding a +2 bonus to your initiative rolls as its leadership perk, which is great, and I find that I am taking incredible initiative on just about every character that I build. The 1-action version of Ready Arms, its directive, is going to be very variable in terms of how good it is. You and all allies within 30 feet can interact to draw, switch hands, or swap weapons as a reaction. And this is where some of the mechanics of the game get a little weird, since you don't have a reaction in your first turn until you've gone. If you end up rolling well on initiative, which you are likely to do because of incredible initiative, and your allies don't have actions yet, you can't really use this to get them to draw their weapons effectively. Which feels weird to me. But as far as the switch hand stuff goes, since a bunch of the ancestries have either 4 or 6 arms, being able to kind of swap what gear they are using without having to use their own actions feels like big game to me. So I think the 1-action version of this is still strong, and the 2-action version is exceptional. So not only do you get to do that, but then you also get to either strike, area fire, or auto fire with a weapon you drew or swapped to. And if your strike hits, or if a target failed its save against your area fire or auto fire, one ally can make a strike against that same target as a reaction. So I think I just like this a lot better than From the Shadows. You are getting incredible initiative. You are maybe gaining the ability to change your allies from martial, like melee characters, into ranged characters, while also striking and having someone else make a strike as a reaction. And especially if you have any sort of like fighter style ally that has increased accuracy over everyone else, getting them extra strikes at full accuracy feels like a really big deal. This feels quite powerful to me, even if there is sort of maybe a raw issue with the sort of interacting to draw and how initiative is going to work. Next up is In the Spotlight, which is our performance-focused one, which is one of the charisma skills, so that makes sense. This is one that I don't particularly like. The 1-action version is kind of interesting. You nominate yourself and an ally within 10 feet, you stride or step, and then your ally can stride or step as a reaction as long as they end the same distance or closer to you than they started. So as a 1-action activity, I think that is fine when you pair that with Get 'em. That can be a very, very reasonable turn. But I'm just very unimpressed by the 2-action activity here. So if you use 2-action, both you and your selected ally count any enemies that you both threaten as being flanked, regardless of your relative positions, until the start of your next turn. Your ally becomes concealed against ranged strikes made by creatures within 10 feet until the start of your next turn, or the ally moves, whichever comes first. I don't like that the 2-action activity here has nothing associated with damage output, and this kind of requires that your 3rd action is a regular strike if you are trying to take advantage of the flanking. And the concealment that your ally gets is pretty specific. It's concealed against ranged strikes made by creatures within 10 feet. That feels a little bit too niche. This is one of the ones that I think feels weaker to me. Next up is the Infosphere Director, which is associated with computers and all sorts of digital stuff. You are going to get Digital Assessment, which is a phenomenal 1-action activity. So this is a recall knowledge against a creature within 100 feet, and when you succeed at identifying your target with recall knowledge, you note a resistance or immunity in the creature's defenses in addition to any other benefits. So this is 1-action recall knowledge plus, essentially. That alone is quite good. Recall knowledge is already a strong action. But if you use the 2-action activity, you now add a strike to that, and you and your allies gain a +1 circumstance bonus to AC against attacks made by that target until the start of your next turn. That is already good, and there's one more thing on top of that. If the target has the tech trait, which is kind of exactly like what it sounds, it must attempt a fortitude save against your class DC, and on a failure, the target becomes glitching 1. And this is a new status effect. So if you have glitching equipment and take any action involving that equipment, you must attempt a flat check to see what occurs. If you have the glitching condition, you must attempt this flat check at the beginning of each one of your turns. So the DC of the flat check equals 5 plus your condition value or the item's condition value. So this is going to be a DC 6 flat check from this ability, it looks like. On a critical success, you reduce your glitching value by 1. On a success, you can act normally or your equipment works. But on a failure, you take an item penalty to all of your checks and DCs equal to your glitching value or the glitching value of the item. And on a critical failure, the glitching object just doesn't work, and you use the actions you took to attempt those actions. and a glitching creature uses the same effect as a failure and is also stunned 1 on this critical failure. So this potentially ends up wasting some enemy actions or stops an item from working. This feels quite solid. And the last subclass here is Through Desperate Times, which is the healing focused subtrack. This is going to give you battle medicine as a bonus feat. The one action version of this activity is perhaps not good on its own, but that's okay. So keep on keeping on. Until the start of your next turn, you select an ally within 30 feet of you, and that ally increases the next healing they receive by an amount equal to your charisma modifier plus half of your level. So at level 1, that would be 4 more bonus healing, and this is going to keep scaling up with your level. That by itself is perhaps not good. Adding that additional that additional healing to a heal that someone else is going to cast later is maybe not going to be effective, generally speaking, because between the time that you use this action and the time that someone else heals that person, they may go down to a different enemy strike in the meantime. So I don't like this as a one action activity that is intending to buff someone else's healing. And note that this says it increases the next healing they receive, so you can't add your charisma modifier multiple times by healing someone multiple times within a single round. However, the 2 action is good. So you use your first action to increase the healing, the second action becomes battle medicine, and then the target is only immune to your battle medicine for the next 10 minutes instead of 1 day. So in the situation where you are expecting a long adventuring day, you have a battle medicine that is going to just have its amount increased on a regular basis. I don't know that this would be my go-to subtrack, but this is good utility. If you are in a party that does not have good burst healing already and you need something to kind of round out the edges, I could see absolutely enjoying this subtrack. Just in terms of an evaluation of the subtracks as a whole here, the subtracks are each offering a very real difference in gameplay. You might not think that a single 1 to 2 action activity is going to totally change the character. I think in this case with the Envoy, the interactions that these various things are going to have with Get 'em does mean that these subtracks are going to play out very, very differently from each other. And now let's transition into kind of why you might want to play an Envoy now that we understand all of these different subtracks. So, why play an Envoy? What sort of class fantasy is this offering that existing classes don't already offer? At a base level, the class chassis is pretty attractive. You get charisma, you get a ton of skill trainings, and you're going to be generically good at stuff, like something like a thaumaturge might be. But what really makes this unique is that you, as a player, have a lot of agency to make good decisions to make battles go easier in a way that a lot of other classes don't. Many classes have what I would call rotations, that is, set patterns that they are going to follow. A Magus is often going to spell strike, and at some point recharge that spell strike and spell strike again. A Swashbuckler is going to get panache and then use that panache for a cool finisher, and that process is going to repeat. An Envoy has such a good degree to adjust to the exact battle map that is in front of you. If you need to reposition allies, you can do it. If you need to take extra attacks, you can do it. If you need to give extra accuracy to someone, you can do it. If you need to succeed at skill checks, you can do it at master proficiency at will. This is a very adaptable class that I think allows a smart player who is really paying attention to the combat to gain some very strong advantages. I think this is often going to be a selfless class in that you might not be doing the cool thing, but you sure as hell are enabling your allies to be able to do the cool thing and to kind of get where they need to go. You have a really wild range of flexibility in that you can be a ranged character, you could be a martial character, you can hit really hard with your charisma modifier, you give other people accuracy. I think the class fantasy of the Envoy is exactly what it says in the description. It is a leader. If you are the most experienced person at your table and you want to play a class that lets you help everyone else, this is it. This is exactly what you've been looking for. And I hope the Pathfinder 2E Commander has some similar designs as to what's going on here, because I am loving what I am seeing from the Envoy. And now I'm going to highlight some of the feats that I think are really good on the Envoy. And as I look down at my notes here, I am realizing that a lot of these feats are just really good. Even before we get to like the level 1 class feats, these characters that, you get just from your initial directive and your directive from your leadership track, like you already have a really good character. The first one is a really simple reaction called Quip at level 1. So the trigger is a creature within 30 feet is damaged by an ally's strike, and then you just get to attempt to demoralize the triggering creature. And I think this is really important for your action economy. This feat is very strong because you are often going to take a 1-action directive and a 2-action directive in the same turn, not leaving you room in your action economy to demoralize. And so Quip lets you demoralize using your reaction, which I think is quite powerful. But bust out your natural ambition, humans, because there are 4 different incredibly good first level Envoy feats. The next one is Size Up, which I think is incredible. Summarizing, you essentially spend a little bit of time studying one of your targets, and you are going to end up getting a +1 circumstance bonus to deception, diplomacy, intimidation, and perception checks against that asset. That's what we're going to call them, your asset. And you also get a bonus to attempt to recall knowledge about them. Now, the big draw here is that you gain the benefits of the 2-action get 'em while using the 1-action get 'em on an asset. So this is not something you are going to get to do all the time. This is something that you are going to get to do versus targets that you kind of know ahead of time or can scope out for a little while. But this essentially means that you get 4 actions in a turn, as you could do a 2-action get 'em and then a 2-action other directive. This is quite powerful, and you get to maintain a number of assets equal to your charisma modifier. So if you are being sent out against a gang of 4 bandits, well, guess what? You can make all of them one of your assets. Thumbs up, no notes, great feat. Still on level 1 though. Next we have Take 'em Alive. You can add the non-lethal trait to attacks. Ignore that part, that's not the part that matters. 2-action version. If you use your 2 actions, you strike the targets with a non-lethal attack. On a success, you add a status bonus to damage equal to your charisma modifier. That's great, we love that on this character. On a critical success, an ally within 30 feet can strike the target as a reaction using their non-lethal attack as well. So this can be a really good way to get consistent damage because the 2-action is always adding your charisma modifier, and if you're rolling hot, you get an entire extra strike worth of damage as one of your allies uses their reaction. And if that's not good enough for you and you don't like any of those, you also have the first level feat Watch Out, which is essentially a nimble dodge, a +2 circumstance bonus to AC, but you get to do it on one of your allies within 60 feet of you. This is pretty hot. The Envoy has exceptionally good options for first level feats. Jumping ahead now to level 4, I really like the Influence reaction. It's once a day when you're about to roll Deception, Diplomacy, or Intimidation, you get to roll twice and use the higher result. Again, Starfinder 2E is a little bit more friendly in handing out fortune effects, and I absolutely love it. There is then also a level 16th follow-up feat that can increase the frequency of this to up to 3 times a day. If you end up playing this as a ranged character, Distant Fate might be useful for you, as you can feint against an opponent at a range of 100 feet instead of just melee reach. So if you want to feint while using a gun, you have a way to do that. Your directives really eat up your action economy and give you very good things to do, though. I'm not sure if this ends up being worth taking because your directives are such good actions. But this is interesting, and I think worth pointing out. Next up is Hang In There. This is a 6th level feat that allows you to hand out some temporary hit points. You choose yourself or an ally within 30 feet and then attempt a diplomacy check. And if you have master or legendary proficiency, you can increase the DC to increase the number of hit points that you are going to give out. On a critical success, the target gains temporary hit points equal to double their level plus your charisma modifier. On a success, it's temporary hit points equal to their level plus your charisma modifier. On a failure, it's not great. And same with a critical failure. You can't use it for either 1 minute or 1 hour afterwards. In talking about the critical success numbers, this is more temporary HP than you get from something like being a barbarian or by being a Razmiran priest, even. So on a critical success, this is a lot of HP that you are handing out. It is temporary HP, mind you, and not immediately reusable, but this is good. If you can do this and do the sort of battle medicine plus on people, you might be a pretty solid spot healer while still having all of these other options from your directives in your pocket. I think I like Hurry as a 6th level feat, though. So this is just one action. One ally within 30 feet of you becomes quickened for 1 round. You can use it to interact, step, or stride. So in the turns where you don't need another action, but you know that your ally does, you can still use a 2-action directive and then use 1 action Hurry to kind of move your action to someone else. This is not action positive, like something like Haste might be over time, where Haste initially costs 2 actions, but then after 3 turns, you've netted an action after the 4th turn, you are really going action positive. But this moves actions to where they need to be for a low cost. If you don't have another way to move your allies around the battlefield already, this can be quite powerful. Leaning into the healing options that this class has, Cheer Up is really, really good for an 8th level feat. So, you pick an ally, you pat him on the back. The target reduces the value of one of the following conditions by 2. Clumsy, enfeebled, frightened, sickened, stupefied. There's no roll. All you have to be is trained in medicine. You don't need to scale that one up. All you have to be is trained in medicine, and for 1 action, you can get rid of sickened 2, stupefied 2, frightened 2, clumsy 2, enfeebled 2. That sounds great. As you go up to higher level play, status effects can be really, really scary, especially if a huge portion of the party gets them all at the same time. And you can cheer up multiple people. If you are around all of your allies and everyone just got sickened too by an aura, cheer up, cheer up, cheer up. Well, guess what? Now your allies have been cleansed of that affliction. Like, this is great. And if you are a numbers go up sort of gamer, you might like Got 'em. So Get 'em is your initial reaction. Sorry, your initial directive. Got 'em is the 10th level follow-up feat. So if your ally's strike hits the target of your Get 'em, you can, as a free action once per round, so this is repeatable, give your ally a status bonus to damage equal to your charisma modifier, which again is probably going to be like +4 or +5. So this is free action once per round, assuming that you are using Get 'em regularly, just 4 or 5 extra damage. This is sick. This is a great numerical increase. If you just tell your ally, hey, you essentially are always going to have a +4 or +5 to damage from this ability, they would go, that's sick. And so this is one of the things I meant when I said that the Envoy isn't necessarily going to be the star of the show, but you really get to enable your allies well. Now we have another cleverly named follow-up feat, That'll Show 'em, which requires Watch Out, and that's the reaction that gives the +2 to AC to one of your allies. So the first time each round you use your Watch Out reaction, you can make a melee or ranged strike against the triggering creature. So that's great. So your reaction turns from sort of like nimble dodge for an ally into nimble dodge for an ally and a ranged attack of opportunity. That's great. I like this a lot. I think this is incredibly powerful. Really gives you incentive to like have a gun or other ranged option on this character. And as we move up to higher levels, these feats are just going to keep getting better and better. I really like Master Plan at 14th level. So this gives you a reaction. An ally you reviewed stratagems with at the beginning of the day is about to attempt an attack roll or skill check. And this gives them a sure strike. It lets them roll 2 times and take the better result. So you can review stratagems with up to 5 allies at the beginning of the day. That's probably your whole adventuring party. So this gives you 5 reaction sure strikes that you get to use on your allies. Assuming that most of your allies are capable of making strikes, this is quite good. And notice here that it says attempt an attack roll. It does not say with a weapon, meaning your spellcasters that are about to cast some absolutely disgusting attack roll spell that might be, kind of hit big or do nothing, now get to roll that with advantage, and they don't need to use their own actions to cast a sure strike before that. This is great. Again, you don't always have to be the star of the show. 18th level gives out an absolutely busted feat that applies to your allies. Fast synergy. Each of your allies within 100 feet of you gets a second reaction that can only be used for the directives you issue. So if you've been listening to this video and thinking, yeah, but what if I already have a reaction from my class? At endgame, this issue is going to be solved, as you just might hand out 4 or 5 extra reactions to your party. This is kind of wild. The bigger your party is, the better this gets. And there are a couple of cool endgame feats beyond this as well, such as Improvised Legend, which lets you use your Improvised Mastery once per hour instead of twice per day. And again, your Improvised Mastery is the thing that lets you gain your Master or then later Legendary proficiency in any skill. And True Leader at 20th level essentially quickens you, and you can use that extra action to issue a 1-action envoy direction as a free action. This is not an exhaustive guide to all of these directives, but this should give you enough information to kind of go and figure out how you should be building your envoys and what you should be doing and thinking about in terms of feat selection. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. What do I think about the Envoy as a whole? 2 thumbs up. I think this is an above average power level class. I would not recommend this class to new players of the system. And by that, I mean, if you don't know the core rule set of Pathfinder and Starfinder, this class is probably not for you. But as you get more and more proficiency in the system, I think this class is going to get stronger and stronger. I think you have great ways of using all of your actions on your turn, as well as your reaction, and potentially even your allies' reactions as well. I think this class is powerful, well-rounded, can be played in a number of different styles, gives you the ability to show off your mastery of like various skill actions you can do. I think the Paizo team kind of nailed the design on this one. If you have any thoughts, please throw them down in the comments below. If you think there's something powerful here that I missed, I would love to hear about it, as I am still learning things about this system, as is very clear, as I absolutely missed that critical sentence about only getting 1 directive per turn. That's kind of how life goes sometimes. Live and learn. And I hope you enjoyed, and I hope this was useful, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. See ya!